Hello and welcome to episode 35 of Can We Still Be Friends, the podcast that tests the limits of the friendship between two people who mistake movie taste for personal morality. I'm Nate Goss, here with Ryan Ebling. The Golden Globes are behind us, the Oscar nominees have been announced, and this year's frontrunner seems to be The Revenant, directed by Alejandro G. Inarritu. So we have decided to talk about last year's award winner, Birdman, also directed by Inarritu. Inarritu has divided us for as long as Ryan and I have known each other. Our difference of opinion over Birdman isn't quite as wide as our feelings on Inarritu's 2005 film, Babel. But we still don't see eye to eye. With Inarritu poised to take home more awards this year, we decided to have it out over one of his movies that we won't necessarily come to blows over.
Birdman was a solid box office hit, earning over $42 million, but of course its legacy will forever be in its Oscar win for Best Picture. Critics were mostly favorable in their reviews, with Stephen Rea of the Philadelphia Inquirer calling Birdman one of the best films ever.
Ever.
Yeah, they put that on the box.
Ever.
Ever, right. Of all the films, this is one of the best.
One of the best, yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't say it's the best. That would be.
It's up there.
I don't even think they would put that on the box. I think the filmmakers would still be like, okay, Stephen Rea, we're glad you like it. But now, some critics were not taken by the film, with Scott Tobias, writing for The Dissolve, famously opening his review by declaring that Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu is a pretentious fraud. So, Nate's praise may not be as superlative as Rea's, and my distaste may not be as absolute as Tobias's, but the lines are pretty clearly drawn.
So is Birdman the transcendent piece of art that many believe it to be?
Or is it merely flash masquerading as art? Can we even say if it's good or bad? Those are just labels. Just noises in our head that we mistake for true knowledge. Keep listening.
You risk nothing.
Let's go. Walk.
Where are we going?
Get you some coffee. Did I do something to disrespect you?
Not yet.
Look, I have a lot riding on this fucking plane.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. People know who I am.
Bullshit. They don't know you, your work, man. They know the guy from the bird suit who goes and tells coy, slightly vomitous stories on Letterman.
Well, I'm sorry if I'm popular, Mike.
Popular? You know, I don't give a shit. Popular? Popularity is the slutty little cousin of prestige, my friend.
Okay, I don't even know what the fuck that means, so.
Well,
yeah.
It means my reputation is riding on this, and that's worth.
All right, so that was Edward Norton playing Mike Shiner and Michael Keaton playing Regan Thompson, talking about art, acting, prestige,
Popularity, yeah.
Yeah, reputation, all the important stuff in life.
Also sort of explaining the plot of the movie.
Yes, which is why we chose
that clip, right?
Yeah. So we're talking Birdman.
Uh-huh.
Last year's Best Picture winner at the Oscars.
Yep. And Best Director, correct?
Correct. So this episode is the episode that we've probably talked about even before we started this podcast, the Inarritu episode that we knew we were going to have to do eventually.
Yeah, but it isn't even the Inarritu episode we
True.
know we're going to have to do. I don't know if we're ever going to do that. I don't know if that would be a good conversation. I don't know if it would be productive.
To talk about Babel.
Right.
Which was a film that we fought hard about before we even had this podcast idea even.
Yeah.
But this is a good way to kind of, test the Inarritu waters a little bit.
We'll see.
Can we keep it civil?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think so.
And it is very relevant now, considering that The Revenant, which we both actually saw together, which
It was like the third movie we've seen in the theater.
We never
together.
do that. We never go see movies together.
Do you know the two movies other than this one?
The Expendables.
The Expendables.
Can't forget that.
That was terrible. And then the second time we went to the theater together, we actually saw 3 movies at once.
Oh, yeah. It was the Cornetto trilogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great.
That was awesome.
That was a lot of fun. So I don't know why we don't see more movies together.
I don't know.
But we don't.
But
we saw The
We're
Revenant.
busy people.
Do we want to talk about that at all or not?
We can. Yeah. It was impressive to me.
I liked it. And the more I think and I wasn't sure what I thought about it right after seeing it. I don't think that necessarily either of us were.
No, I don't know if anybody can.
Yeah.
Really.
I kind of had to sit on it for a little bit, but even just the next morning, I was kind of like, yeah, I think I really like that movie a lot.
I liked it more than certainly a lot of other Inarritu movies I've seen.
Yeah, but it is definitely an Inarritu movie.
Yes.
And it's got all the touchstones, including the Emmanuel Lubezki cinematography, always beautiful.
Which is great, yeah.
Anyways, I don't want to ramble too much.
That's fine.
It does feel good to be back, though.
Yeah,
we've been on a little bit of a break. We had our last episode was our Christmas episode, if you can believe it.
Yeah, which we recorded right after Thanksgiving. So
yeah,
we more than a month out of the studio.
You know, we're getting into award season, so I feel like it's fun to talk about movies, especially right now, because there's a lot of good stuff to see. There's a lot of good stuff that just kind of gets you in the mood to even watch older films that you like, you know, just remember really liking and appreciating.
Get ready for those montages at the Oscars and being like, oh yeah, I need to see One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest again. It's been a while.
It happens to me every year.
Yep.
And I never see it.
Nope. I haven't seen it in a while. I do like it though. So let's talk about seeing Birdman initially. Like back in the day, back in
2014.
2014.
Jeez.
We were I think 2 years younger.
Bright-eyed youngsters,
1 year
really.
younger, really? Yeah. It's tough to look back at a time that far away and then really be able to assess it.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll do our best. When did you watch it? What did you? What drew you to Birdman?
I mean, I was going to see Birdman no matter what, because I have followed Inarritu. I mean, he did his sort of trilogy. I forget if it has a name or not.
I don't know if it does either.
Amoros Perros, 21 Grams, and Babel.
The Dwindling trilogy.
They all kind of have a patchwork sort of chronological. You know, we got very tired of those kind of movies, I think, with so many of them.
That's the same guy. Oh, that's all connected.
Everything's connected. All these different stories lead to something, or they don't.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, I was a fan of all three of those, and I know that's kind of a minority opinion, actually, I think, to really like all of them.
Yep.
But I did, and I kind of saw something in Inarritu that made me want to follow him. And what led me to Inarritu, actually, was not anything about his filmmaking necessarily. It was actually really liking the composer that he worked with in those movies, Gustavo Santaolalla. Mm-hmm. But I did actually just really like the films he was making. And after Babel, he did Beautiful, which I saw, and I will admit that one I had a hard time with. I could see a lot of why a lot of people don't like Inarritu in that film, especially.
I didn't see it. It looked awful.
It's long. It's a slog to get through. It's depressing. It's full of passion, as it always is. But that one to me wasn't connecting. But Birdman seemed like such a departure for him. Like he was going to try doing a comedy. I also really liked I still do like Michael Keaton, as we talked about when we did our Batman episode.
Right.
The hard part was that it barely played anywhere at first until it started getting all this awards buzz.
Right.
And I saw it in a theater, a pretty mainstream theater, so it wasn't like some indie art house theater or anything. But it was a full theater. Yeah. I saw it with my wife, and we liked it. I guess that's the most I can say without giving away too much and getting into our conversation, but we both liked it, actually, and I think I was in a theater where actually most people liked it, surprisingly.
Okay, I can see that making a difference. I really liked Amoros Perros and 21 Grams, and I really, as we've said, hated Babel, and was kind of done with Inarritu. Saw that Beautiful was coming out, and I was like, nope.
So you hated that movie so much you were completely almost done with the director altogether?
Here's the thing. And this was a really common thought, is that it was the screenwriter he had been working with. And everybody said, like, this is his last movie with this guy. We're going to see Inarritu shine. And so to see Inarritu without that screenwriter, I think, was something that I and a lot of people were, like, really interested to see. Then Beautiful came out, and I was waiting to hear the verdict on that, and the verdict was not good. Mm-hmm. Granted, I didn't see it, so I don't have a very strong leg to stand on. But you've confirmed that Beautiful was not very good. But anyway, Birdman was such a departure. I saw the trailer and I was like, okay, wow. That does not look like anything he's done before. And his serious involvement with Alfonso Cuarón and Guillermo del Toro and their involvement in his artistry, I'm never not going to be curious about something he's done.
It's a really interesting scene going on in film right now.
Yeah. And then it was getting a lot more buzz, and the critics were a little bit split on it. At least people I was reading, like the Chicago critics weren't fans of it. I just noticed Nathan Rabin's not especially helpful review on Letterboxd of 1 star that says this one is strictly for the birds, quite poor. It doesn't really say anything about the movie, but that was kind of the vibe of the critics around here. And I saw it because I know somebody who gets screeners, and she lent it to me.
Lucky dog.
I'm not gonna. Well, they're all digital now, so I can't get them from her. So I watched it at home with Kelsey, and neither of us liked it. So that's why I was so interested for you to say that the theater seemed on board, and I wonder how much that would have affected it. I was impressed with the acting and the filmmaking of it, and the drum score. Like, there's a lot of stuff that propels it, and it's trying really hard to be interesting.
And since we're talking about our first viewing, there was a lot of stuff that I think most people even knew going into it, the meta-ness of sort of Michael Keaton playing, but also I think most people knew going into it that it was going to give you the illusion of all being one take.
Yeah, so that stuff was as interesting as it wanted it to be. But yeah, I just wasn't terribly invested in the story or anything.
Okay. Why don't you say, I mean, I know you didn't like it.
Yeah.
Did you rate it on Letterboxd when
I
you
did,
saw it?
And I'm surprised at my rating.
Which was?
3.5.
So you liked it.
I don't know what that, I never...
Were you just impressed by it, maybe?
I guess, yeah.
Is that an impressive rating?
I think so. Did you rate it?
I did. I rated it 4 stars.
Okay.
It was not my favorite movie of 2014. I mean, there was a lot of good movies last year. There was Whiplash. There was Boyhood.
Yeah.
My favorite movie of the year was Ida.
Grand Budapest Hotel was last year.
Yeah, that's true.
Selma was last year.
Yeah.
Foxcatcher. Those are all very good movies.
Yeah, there was a lot of good movies, and Birdman was not my favorite. In fact, I usually rank my movies just as I see them, and I think I went back to my list, and Birdman was like 10, I think. So you gave Birdman 3.5 stars.
Yeah.
I gave it 4 stars. Do we want to go ahead and just right now talk about on the rewatch?
We might as well.
Just the baseline.
It doesn't
okay.
sound like we're very different on this.
You said 3.5 on your rewatch.
I did.
What are we doing?
I'm going with a low 3, like could drop to 2.5.
Okay.
It doesn't sound like huge, but it
is.
I did not like it more. What about you?
So I was at 4.
Yep.
And I think I am going to drop it down, but only to a 3.5.
Wow. Okay.
I
feel like, okay.
What?
Well, it's just weird.
What's weird about that?
I don't know. I guess I thought you liked this movie.
I do like it. Hey, let me just put it this way: 3.5. But I want to defend this movie. I like this movie. I give 3.5s to. This is me personally. I give 3.5s to stuff that is better than average. It's just not necessarily as great as a lot of the other movies I'll see that
it's
year.
A solid B, maybe.
If you're doing letters or grades, I would say that's like a B, exactly. Maybe even a B minus. I like Inarritu because he, as a filmmaker, does things that to me are thrilling about going and seeing the movies. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And I wouldn't want him to stop doing that. Like I'm basically at this point going into a lot of Inarritu knowing that there's going to be aspects of it that aren't necessarily things that I love about it. But you kind of have to take him as a whole package.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want that package to go away. So I still very much appreciate it. And there are things about this movie that I absolutely love. And there are other things that I think don't work at all.
So your defense of Birdman is a defense of Inarritu.
I think so. Even though I don't think this is his Birdman, I don't think is his best movie. But I think it has characteristics in it that are why I like Inarritu. Okay.
What are those? Should we talk about those characteristics, or should we talk about Birdman specifically and what you think might be problematic?
What if I meet you halfway and I'll tell you what I think really this time around I thought did not work with this movie?
All right, let's do that.
Because I think then we can have some common ground and I can try to maybe pull out why I still actually do like this movie, even with these things. This is the big problem I have with Birdman, is that it actually is, I think, trying to be funny, and it's never funny.
Nope. Not a funny movie.
Maybe other people found it funny, but I found it trying really hard to be funny and failing every single time.
Yep.
And it's hard to do comedy when you can't have a cut, I think, because you can't rely on post to sort of pull out the laughter and the timing that maybe you didn't get out of the performance. So I get that challenge of all the comedy having to come out of the performance almost. Right. But it's mostly in the writing. Like the jokes, if you can even call them jokes, are so stupid. Yep. Like the amount of time they mention balls.
This place is horrible. Smells like balls.
Leslie. Come here. Come here. Play with my balls.
And this play kind of starting to feel like a miniature, deformed version of myself that just keeps following me around and like hitting me in the balls with a tiny little hammer.
I don't know anybody who would laugh who is maybe like past the age of 20. I don't know. Like,
yeah,
that's not funny.
Right.
And I know Mike Shiner is supposed to be pretty obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe you're at times supposed to kind of laugh at that. I know you're not necessarily supposed to like him either, but this guy is not providing any sort of comic relief that the movie thinks he's supposed to.
I think he is sometimes funny. It's not the script. Yeah, it's not. I think Edward Norton knows how to be funny, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, he has that potential for sure.
I think he does as the best he can. I think he's the funniest part of it. I think he's the closest to actually getting a laugh of anybody, which is awful because you've got at least 3 actors in this movie who are very strong comedians.
Yeah.
With Michael Keaton, Emma Stone, and Zach Galifianakis, and none of them approach comedy in this movie. And I don't know if it's because they smelled Prestige and they were trying to play it straight, or if there were things that were supposed to be funny, like that scene where Emma Stone is sitting on the ledge and somebody yells jump and she says eat me, and they yell jump, then jump on my face, and she says I love this city. Like, are you supposed to laugh at that?
You were supposed to laugh at this movie a lot.
I
think it wanted you to think it was a funny movie. I think it also wanted to play around and kind of poke fun a lot at how self-important actors can be sometimes.
But it's such a self-important movie.
Yeah, it is.
That you can't think it's trying to joke about. Like, if it's joking about that, it's joking in a very desperate, very passive-aggressive, self-effacing way.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, you're just trying to cope. Like, you really feel these things about yourself, but you're trying not to.
It's kind of like someone realizing something about themselves and then being like, "Well, that's funny, right?"
Right? Yeah. And I know me being like a typical OCD, whatever. But could you please wash your hands before you touch my things?
Yeah, it's exactly like that. And I'm with you. Like, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's a failing of this movie.
It also feels like a lot of inside jokes, which to me is why it won the Oscar. It's got these inside jokes that I think make actors and make Hollywood people laugh, but like to a lot of us, it's just not that funny. Like when Naomi Watts' character says, "Why don't I have any self-respect?" and another character says, "You're an actress, honey."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't know. I don't know if it's just the script or if it's just the long take thing. I just don't think I could ever envision Inarritu making a funny movie.
Yeah, although I do think that you could imagine a line like that being in something like All About Eve, couldn't you?
Yeah, but the tone is so different. And
right.
I don't think Inarritu could ever achieve that tone. The movie's taking itself too seriously for that. It's this uncomfortable thing where the person isn't actually satirizing it. It's satirizing it as a way to save face in the admission that they are as bad as the satire should make them out to be.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think I can totally agree with you on that. I guess now let me go on the flip side and give you the positive of that. What I appreciate about the movie. I don't have a problem.
That's it? That's all that you didn't like about the movie?
No, there's plenty of other stuff I didn't like.
Okay.
We can get back to that. But I guess the self-importance of it and the insideness of it doesn't bother me, because to me, this movie definitely speaks to artists. And it's very hard to make a movie about being an artist without looking like you're pretentious. And I think this is a movie that's speaking to artists, but all artists, even the hacks and the wannabes, because I think it's a very honest movie about the internal dialogue with the self that happens when anybody tries any sort of creative endeavor. And more Regan Thompson. I think so much about this movie, other than that, is just distraction. Like, I think the Emma Stone, Edward Norton crap is distraction. But when you're with Riggin and you're in his head, or when you're following his character, which is most of the movie, 3.5 stars worth of the movie. That's the stuff that I find compelling and the stuff that I actually resonate a lot with. And there's no way I can even talk about this without sounding myself pretentious.
That's
but
fine.
I had
I don't
my
think
past
having artistic ambitions is inherently pretentious.
But I'm just saying I had my past wanting to be a professional musician.
Right.
And so many of the internal dialogues and the thoughts that Regan Thompson has about ambition and sort of weighing the cost of your reputation with going out on a limb and trying something new, and the strikes that you know your ego will take if you fail, seem very real to me in Birdman. And so when I watch Birdman, that's the stuff that connects with me very strongly, and actually in a way that I don't think I've really seen in any other movie about the creative process. Honestly, like, the critics who had a hard time with it were the very critics that in my days of being a musician, I would say exactly what Regan Thompson was saying to that critic.
That's a label. These are just all labels. You just label everything. That's so fucking lazy. You're a lazy fucker. You're a lazy.
You know what this is?
Do you even know what that is?
You don't. You know why? Because you can't see this thing if you don't know how to label it. You mistake all those little noises in your head for true knowledge.
Are you finished?
No, I'm not finished. There's nothing in here about technique. There's nothing in here about structure. Nothing in here about intention. It's just a bunch of crappy opinions backed up by even crappier comparisons. You write a couple of paragraphs. And you know what? None of this costs you fucking anything. You risk nothing. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Well, I'm a fucking actor. This play cost me everything.
And I want to get more to that later because I think that that's often maybe misinterpreted, that whole scene.
Yeah, I would like to hear what you have to say.
But that viewpoint of Regan Thompson's towards critics is also very accurate. And it's actually a way of, it's like a self-preservation thing. You feel better and more confident about yourself if you can just write off the critics as being people who don't risk anything and just label things.
Right.
To me, the movie does a bait and switch where I think the audience thought the meta-ness of the movie was Michael Keaton playing a character like Birdman. Yeah. The real meta-ness of this is that this is Inarritu through and through. You are watching Inarritu playing with his own ego and his own reputation and his own history with the critics and his own history with his own movies and what he's trying to do. It might be pretentious, it might be self-important. I find it kind of really compelling and fun to watch. I mean, I love watching a filmmaker take a risk and be very, very transparent about that risk he's taking.
Yeah. Okay. So I can understand what you're saying. I feel like, though, either the movie is so good and unflinching in its portrayal of the insecurity of artistic creation, or it is actually that insecure. And that's how I feel it is, that this is an actually insecure movie, that Inarritu saw the reviews of Babel, saw the reviews of Beautiful, and told me, you can't tell me it's not good. You can't judge it. That's not for you to say. That's how I feel. And to me, that's like, well, no, we can. People can say that there are flaws in your work. To me, it doesn't seem like an honest exploration of those feelings as much as a validation and enabling of those feelings. You want a movie that talks about creation and the insecurity in that? I look at Adaptation or Synecdoche, New York, and Charlie Kaufman exploring those ideas of how selfish am I to be making this thing like Synecdoche, New York, or how could I possibly think I'm going to create anything new with Adaptation? And those insecurities are played out, but they're not saying nobody should ever feel them, but he does sort of rise above them and say, here's where those feelings originate, here is how those feelings manifest themselves, and here's how you can deal with those feelings. I feel like Birdman never gets to that point.
I like Synecdoche, New York, and Adaptation a lot, and Charlie Kaufman is, way better.
It's almost unfair to bring him into it.
It's yeah. I mean, the comparison, they are very much dealing with the creative process, but I think that this movie, in the creative process theme, is dealing more with your ego. And I think what Inarritu is being honest about is often in the creative process, there comes a point where you have to be arrogant and prideful. You have to basically
there
think,
is a level of arrogance to say that something you created deserves to be seen.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think that this movie deals a lot with the delusions that your ego will feed you to get you to that point. But whether that's healthy or not is a theme that this movie actually plays with. The Birdman character, that's actually not a good thing for him.
Right.
But it's the only thing keeping him going. I kept coming back to this line. It's from a U2 record. It's from Octung Baby, which was their Birdman. It was like it was U2 in their place of saying we need to redefine ourselves. We're going to take some risks and reinvent ourselves, and we're going to throw away our past success. But we're also going to basically use that success to make this new thing and be able to redefine ourselves. And there's a line in there from The Fly, which was one of the singles, that just says, "Ambition bites the nails of success." I think that wraps up Birdman perfectly. Like, it's all about ambition and its place in the creative process, especially if you are trying to build upon your past work, which got you some credibility, and how much you have to lean on your success in order to actually bring anything to fruition, and you're in self-doubt the entire time. It's a very complicated layered thing to even try to tackle. Now, I think the big problem a lot of people have is that critic scene, because it's exactly what you're saying. It's Michael Keaton's character, Regan Thompson, saying, you can't not like what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Watching it a second time, I'm not saying this is the way to interpret it, but I think it's fair to interpret everything after Emma Stone's saying, "This is power" on the cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the rest of the movie is delusion. Everything. The camera actually, that's probably where it does the most logical cut, because it dives into the cell phone and then you're at a TV in the bar. That critic is a straw man. It is a straw man character intentionally. No critic who is of their salt is going to give a review before. Yeah. Now, if you're a delusional artist, that's exactly what you would think of a critic, you know.
Right.
That's actually when the Birdman character comes in physically.
Right.
To me, interpreting it that way, the movie makes a hell of a lot more sense, and I can accept it a hell of a lot more.
Yeah.
Because even the ending with the whole nose bit and blowing his nose off, and like that all makes a lot more sense, because it's not so much that that's what happened, it's what Regan Thompson thinks would make him a great artist, you know.
Interesting. I wanted to know what you think of his mental state. The movie's hinting at his delusions and his unstable mental state early, some very obvious hints with his superpowers, his levitating, his mind control. But also the format of the movie lends itself to that, where the timeline is shortened, but it feels like one take. And then all of a sudden, we're on the preview day. When did that happen? Like, how quickly has this been moving? And we realize that we're not getting the full story. We aren't getting everything, even though the cinematic language of a single take leads us to believe we're getting the full story. We are seeing every moment, and then all of a sudden we realize we are not seeing every moment.
Right.
And I think that's a really interesting storytelling technique. I think it's really interesting what you're saying about the delusion. I didn't give it that much credit, I don't think.
And to be honest, that's not how I interpreted it the first time I saw the movie. I think the first time I watched this movie, I was okay with just kind of having it be a little more open-ended. But then as I started thinking about it more, and a lot of what you're saying and the things I have issues with and the stuff I've read of other critics, I was like, you know what? If it is that open-ended, it's kind of a crock of shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you can only be so open-ended before you're just like, no, you're just open-ended because you didn't know what to make of your own movie.
Or you didn't want to commit, yeah.
Yeah. Because that's the criticism I hear a lot of Inarritu, is that he's not really saying anything, you know? And I think that, honestly, because I can say this of The Revenant too, when you're leaving the theater, you're not really sure of what he was saying. Yeah. But I can also say of all of his movies, and maybe what he's saying isn't that important to most people, but the more I think about them, I can come up with some kind of meaning that got me thinking about a certain theme or a certain something in a way that I had not thought about before, or in a fresh artistic way that I was glad to see portrayed on the screen. I don't know if Inarritu deserves more reflection, I guess. I don't know Inarritu. He might be full of crap. I can only speak for what I get out of it, I am willing to give Inarritu the benefit of the doubt that he actually did have a little bit more purpose than some critics are willing to give him credit for.
Well, I appreciate that about you. I think you can feel a movie over and over again pretty well. That's why I like talking to you about movies. And I think you brought up something about Birdman that I didn't think about, but I also feel like the reason it feels like Inarritu isn't saying anything is because he does say certain things very loudly.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like he doesn't go beyond it.
Yeah.
So for this movie, it would be very easy to hear Inarritu screaming at you that internet culture is garbage and critics can't say anything.
I was going to mention
value.
That's another thing that drove me crazy about this movie, because I think that is such a tired, stupid message at this point.
Yes.
That Twitter's vapid. You know, that kind of fame is vapid and
useless.
It is,
but so what?
Who cares?
It just seems really cranky.
And preachy.
It's absolutely preachy.
Yeah.
And then like her, the world is 6 billion years old and the amount of human history is on this single toilet paper. And oh, by the way, they're using toilet paper. And oh, look at he wipes his mouth with all of human history. Ooh. So when you see Inarritu screaming these things at you, I wonder if he means any of the nuanced stuff, if any of that's intended, or if you're picking up on it. Right. And that's nice. That's good that you picked up on it. But to me, one of the more important lines in this movie is actually a line written by William Shakespeare, which is, "It's a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury signifying nothing." Now, I do not think that Inarritu is an idiot. But
that seems to be what you're getting at here.
No, that's not what I'm getting at.
Okay.
But even before, and this is dead truth, before that scene happened in Birdman.
Which scene are you talking about? The toilet paper scene?
No, the Hamlet or the Macbeth scene, where the homeless guy is yelling Macbeth.
Yeah.
By an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
Where you going, man? Is that too much? I was just trying to give you a range. It's a little bit too much, I can tell, because
that line, full of sound and fury, but signifying nothing. I was like, that line describes Inarritu. And then it was in the movie, and I was like, maybe I heard that someplace, and Inarritu was referencing that. But I feel like his movies are like blustery and impressive and invite that sort of very surface level brilliance of like the cinematography is impressive, the filmmaking, the technique is impressive, the performances are impressive. Do they mean anything? That I think is left to be determined.
Well, if there's a fault of Inarritu's, I think is that he just gives you everything. He just will throw everything at the wall in a movie. Some of it is really heavy-handed and hits the nail right on the head, and others of it, I do think that there's layers to what he's doing that you kind of have to dig a little bit deeper in. But then you also bring up the impressiveness of what he does, and if that even really has any meaning. I think sometimes it does have a lot of meaning. I think sometimes it has little meaning. I'm willing to even say the continuous take thing, it might just be that this is a movie about theater and he wanted to have a filmmaking approach that felt more like performance. Watching characters perform something live for
an hour and however many.
And even if that's an illusion, because we do know if you read up on it that there were at least a few cuts, but they were very long takes. It was a very collaborative, coordinated effort, very much like theater. Now, is that enough of a reason to do that? I don't know, maybe not. That seems pretty simplistic. But then again, it's impressive.
Yeah.
And it does make sense with the movie. So I'm okay to just give it a check and say, okay, moving on. If I'm going to trash not just a movie, but a director, like Scott Tobias does, that's basically saying I'd rather have a world where this person does not make movies.
Yeah.
And I'm not willing to say that at all about Inarritu because he reminds me, now I don't know, he's not as good, but he reminds me of the things I love about watching like a Herzog movie or an Ingmar Bergman movie. Like they're going to say to you, I am an artist,
I did that because I wanted to.
I did that because I do what I want. I am not trying to sell tickets, and
then a movie like Birdman feels like it undercuts that.
Like it wants to have the best of both worlds. Yeah.
If Inarritu was whatever, like cards on the table, here's me. I don't care. Like it or don't like it. I made it. I actually think he did the long take thing purposeful. Like, it feels purposeful. It does not feel gimmicky, really. The way it affects the timeline is important. And I think, like you said, it's a very interesting idea to say, we're talking about a play, let's make it feel like a play, and that you have to watch everybody through every moment. But there are times where he does things where I'm like, why are you doing this? There's a part where the play is going on, and the camera drifts up the stairs and focuses on the hallway.
Yes.
For a really long time. And you sort of hear the play in the background.
And that was right after he's run through Times Square in his underwear, and he has maybe not pulled off the play, but he's at least, they've gotten through the play.
Yeah.
And the scene that you're talking about with the hallway is when Zach Galifianakis' character is on the phone trying to explain to the people who are funding this thing why they shouldn't pull out. He says, like, just give me 10 minutes. Okay. So we're not really sure at that point whether it's been a success or not. And it's in the hallway scene that you hear the applause.
Yeah.
So that serves a very small purpose of at least understanding that for whatever reason the audience liked that. Now, what you're saying is, why show a hallway and why not just show the audience? Or,
well, it just, yeah.
I think that is actually connected to the toilet paper scene about insignificance, because you also hear with the applause, like, I think it's the heating or the radiator. And the idea is that even when you're doing something that you think is so important, the world is just coasting by. The world is just going by. You saw a lot of that actually in The Revenant too.
Interesting connection.
But does that entire theme need to be wedged into this movie? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it's like I said, he just throws everything at you.
As far as him throwing things at the audience, here's why I think that's irresponsible. Because I think part of being a good artist, part of being a good anything is editing. And you just need to know how to trim it down. And then to, like, get, and again, I'm reading into him, but get upset that people feel overwhelmed or confused by your movies. It's like, well, you can't make us focus on it by repeating it and screaming it and making it obvious, and then moving on to the next thing and repeating it and screaming it and making it obvious. It's why I get frustrated with Inarritu.
Yeah.
To the point of just now I'm really caring to see the next thing until the trailer comes out and I'm like, damn, that looks impressive. And then I want to see it. And then I'm like, that was impressive, but okay.
And I thought The Revenant was a little more focused.
It was, yeah.
For Inarritu.
A little bit. A little bit.
For Inarritu.
A little bit.
For Inarritu, it was a little bit more focused.
Because it's barely focused. If you start naming all of the things he addresses, it's very barely focused.
You at one point were talking about, like, we were talking about how he kind of wants to have the best of both worlds. He wants to be the artist, but then he also wants everyone to love him.
Yeah.
You know? And
which, how many times
you
does
were like,
Reagan say?
And you were like, if he was actually putting his cards out on the table. And I think he is in this movie. I think this movie is
Birdman?
Actually, yeah, in Birdman.
You think he's not genuinely telling critics and naysayers that they can't say that about him?
Like I said, I think he is Regan Thompson. And I think Regan Thompson thinks that critics can't say that about him. Like, I can tell you, when I was a musician, we had our following. We had people who liked us, you know, but it was never enough, okay? And we actually would have people who would review us. And for the most part, it was pretty positive. Yeah. And then you get the one person who took a dump on your album.
Yeah.
And it was very hard not to just laser in on that.
Oh, for sure.
You know
Absolutely.
what I mean?
Oh, I know.
I mean, we've even had that with
Everybody
this podcast.
I do that as a teacher.
You know, and I'm not
like,
saying...
I hear one kid say, like, I don't get the point of this lesson. I'm like, whoa, I need to get that kid to not think that about this. Of course. Everybody does that all the time.
No, I know.
I know that.
And I think that this movie is being honest about that. I think that that's what this movie is about, actually, is it's about an artist wanting to be honest and say, I'm an artist. I don't care what anybody thinks. This movie's kind of saying, you might look like that, kind of like the Edward Norton character looks like that. Mike Shiner looks like an actor who genuinely doesn't give a crap.
But he also never has a bad review.
But he also never had, and so I think since you are so much in the mind of Regan Thompson in this is his worldview, his viewpoint. His viewpoint is that I'm a fraud. And so that's why I always kind of thought it was kind of weird that Scott Tobias would call Inarritu a pretentious fraud, because I think this is the movie where he's so honest with everyone in saying,
I feel like I'm a fraud most of the time. Yeah.
But you know what? if we're all being honest with ourselves, I don't care if you're the most outlandish artist ever. I mean, Bob Dylan in his blonde on blonde moment, everyone's got that little sliver. And honestly, I think Inarritu's being honest about saying, maybe I'm not the artist that I think I am. And this is the movie where he's telling you, I might not be the artist that I think I am. I might be Regan Thompson, someone who actually just wants success more than credibility and doesn't want to admit it.
I don't think you're wrong. I just think Inarritu didn't do a good job saying that. The movie sounds whiny and cranky.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's how he meant to sound. I think he meant to say what you're saying. I think you're right. I think that's really interesting. And I think it's very interesting that you're the first person I've heard of catch that. And that's
me and
why
Inarritu have a very soul.
Apparently.
You know, our souls are one.
Yeah.
It
sounds better in Spanish.
Yeah.
But
I think that in his mind, he thought he could maybe pull this off if he made it light enough, which was why he made it a comedy,
right.
and it didn't work.
That didn't work at all. That's its problem.
It is its problem, and it's a big problem, which is why I drop it down to 3.5.
But if he had made it serious, it would have been overly serious.
Yes,
he can't control tone.
Yeah,
at all. He's not. He doesn't have a volume knob. He's got an on-off switch, and that's why he bugs me still.
He's a guy who still hasn't fully pulled off what he thinks he's pulling off.
I put the word arcane down as I was watching this movie because it feels like a movie that is saying something in a code. It's keeping a secret. Like it's not being...
Which is its own problem. Okay, so you're saying maybe I'm the first person who saw it this way. I could just be totally misreading it. It's a way that makes sense to me.
I also
but
haven't
honestly,
read a ton. I mean...
if it's that hard to interpret, it's not a good movie.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
One thing that I feel like I haven't read, and I read quite a few reviews before doing this episode, you know, the movie ends the climax with Regan basically shooting his nose off, shooting his face off.
Yeah.
I couldn't watch that and not immediately think of Chris Burden. He was the performance artist in the 70s who actually had a friend shoot him.
Arm,
and it was performance art. And this is definitely like your go-to, like, that's an artist, man, because he's just trying to wake everyone up, you know, like we're so dull in our everyday life. I want to make you feel something. Exactly. And I think that ending of Birdman is almost like a direct reference. This guy is so desperate to want the audience to think he's real and to think he's really giving the audience something they've never seen before. Again, I think by the time you see that, it's all delusion. And in his mind, that was like, it's the only thing I can do at this point to actually make people think I'm real and a real artist.
Well, yeah. Now, listener Eric, who always writes in.
Of course. Got to hear from Eric.
Who we love his emails. And we haven't talked about this. He wants us to talk about the secondary title.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We haven't even called it that yet.
We haven't. I think we need to re-record the episode, calling it that every time we say it. Just insert that. Insert the, what is it? Unexpected virtue of ignorance.
Yes. And it's or. It's not a subtitle.
Right.
It's Birdman
or the... He called it a secondary title. He didn't call it a subtitle.
No, I was just stressing that for the listeners.
Yes. He had a problem with the climax of the movie being a shooting. And he said, it's just my opinion, but the suicide or murder/suicide with a handgun is a tired, cheap, climactic device, and I'm tired of shootings. And he also said that gunshot wounds don't look like that, and reconstructive surgery doesn't look like that. It just looks like he got hit in the face.
Yeah.
And he's totally right. And now what you're saying, the way you're talking about it, it's made me look at it with more respect and more purpose. It is cheap.
Yeah. That's
and the movie
point.
knows it.
Yeah.
And it's how he ended his play. And it was the only time he knew he was going to get the reaction he wanted from the audience.
Yeah.
There were times where the emotional scenes got laughs. There were times where even when he just came in with a fake gun, it got laughs and it got awkwardness. But every time he shot himself, he got the gasps and the applause. And so it was cheap. It was in there because it was a manipulative thing. And like you're saying, he wanted it to be real. It may have been part of his fear of being a fraud. You know, I'm getting a reaction, but it's still a fake reaction.
Right, so this has got to be real.
In a way, he's still a fraud because he was never going to shoot himself in the head. And so I think Eric's right that we're tired of shootings being climactic. You know, the gun being a tried and true suspense maker. But I think this movie is acknowledging that.
Yeah, and I think that Eric mentions the fact that it doesn't look like he shot himself. It looks like he got hit in the face.
Yeah.
I think that Inarritu, and maybe this is, being a little more hitting the nail right on the head, this was Riggins' attempt to kill that ego. Mm-hmm. And all he ended up doing was giving himself a bigger beak.
In his attempt to rid himself of it, he fully becomes what he was trying to get rid of. Now, here's something that I want to throw at you.
Okay.
The whole movie is maybe not Riggins' delusion, but it's Riggins' mind. That every conversation that he's not a part of is a conversation he's making up. And Mike Shiner's ego is actually at its peak when he's with Riggin, and he kind of tries to humanize him in his own mind through his scenes with his daughter.
How do you do it?
Do what?
How do you go out there every single night and pretend to be somebody else in front of all those people?
I don't pretend out there. I told you. I pretend just about every place else, but not out there.
That's a shame.
What are we doing here?
What do you mean?
I mean, what are we doing here?
I see. Yeah.
But he also makes him impotent.
Mm-hmm.
He also makes him, just standing around naked. Like he makes him like this huge jerk. And it's also the only way I can explain the two actresses making out. It's the conversation between Naomi Watts and Andrea Riseborough. It's actually the conversation where she says, "Why don't I have any self-respect?" And Andrea Riseborough says back, "You're an actress, honey."
Right.
And then Riggin comes in, says the right thing, makes her feel good, and then they kiss, and then they start making out. And it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
I think it and a lot of other scenes make more sense. And the theatricality of the performances, because the performances the whole time feel like this is a little fake.
Yeah.
Everything feels
Look at Naomi
rehearsed.
Watts. Her character is much more like Mulholland Drive
Yes.
than it is in anything else she's
Again,
been.
things Eric said. Eric said in one of his emails, maybe it's just because it's Naomi Watts, but this feels a little Lynchian. I just came up with this as we were talking, so I kind of wonder how it would look on a second viewing if people act differently when they're in a scene with Riggin versus when they're in a scene apart from him. So I'm kind of wondering if this whole movie is through Riggin's perspective.
Like maybe I was wrong about the where I was saying the delusion started, and actually it's the entire movie is just through his viewpoint, and his viewpoint gets more and more warped as the movie goes on.
And I think that there are parts earlier on where he is being honest, that like this is actually what people said to him and what he actually said back. But there are also things that are completely through his paranoid, affirmation-seeking mindset, so that everybody who he doesn't like is a monster and is saying all these terrible things when he's not around. And everybody that he sort of likes is actually kind of sweet or will make out with a woman.
Right.
Maybe the only person who actually speaks to him honestly and that we get the real conversation from is his ex-wife.
Are you okay? You seem, I don't know, you seem abnormally calm.
I am calm. I am great, actually. I've got this little voice that talks to me sometimes. Tells me the truth. It's comforting. Kind of scary, but it's comforting.
I'm going to pretend I didn't hear you say that.
Okay.
I don't know. It makes me want to see this movie again.
I
Gosh
know.
dang it. Maybe it is a good movie. I feel like this is a good time to end it.
Maybe it is.
What did you rate it? Does your rating change now?
It doesn't, because I think the problems really do hamper the movie.
Yeah.
Whatever it's trying to do, and as brilliant as it could be, and maybe is, and we just don't really realize it. Or maybe Inarritu is totally full of himself, and we're giving him way more credit. I still don't know, but I do know that some of the stuff this movie really tried to do, such as be funny, can't see myself really rating it much more than my 3.5. But like I said, star ratings are hard with this movie because I really do appreciate this movie. And I'm not just saying that as sort of a
No, I get it.
wishy-washy,
No.
oh, it's a movie I can appreciate.
Yeah,
but
it's a good film, but not a good movie.
and I really mean that this movie, it has rewards in it if you're willing to look for them. But you gotta struggle to find them, I think.
I think you're right. And I would not have looked for those, and I wouldn't have come to the rewards that we've come to without talking to you about it. Is it a movie worth digging into?
That I don't know.
But we have.
Yeah, we had to. For
and
the
now
episode.
that we have, I'm bumping it back up to a 3.5.
Oh, wow.
And yeah.
That's nice to hear.
Yeah. Well, that's why I like talking to you about movies. If all we did was argue, I don't think I could do this podcast. But you genuinely do enlighten me.
And same here, I hope you know, by the way.
Good. Thank you.
All right. So how are we doing?
Obvious.
Best buds. It's complicated.
Never would have predicted that we would walk away from Inarritu as best buds.
Wow.
But I think we are.
I think we are.
On this movie.
Okay. I'm glad that this worked out the way
I am
it did.
too. I am too.
And I'm also kind of glad that we can be best buds and still not quite know if we really feel the same about the movie. You know what I mean? Like, I think we just really have, maybe it's more of a mutual understanding. I don't know, but I feel so good about, the conversation.
Yeah,
and
maybe it is
everything.
just mutual understanding. Maybe I was riding the high, but it might be a mutual understanding. Because I think we do disagree about what is bad about this movie in certain ways. So, all right. I've upgraded it to a 3.5, downgraded it to a mutual understanding.
That sounds good to
and
me.
Nate's insistence.
I will take it. But I don't think that there's a single Inarritu movie that isn't polarizing in some way. So I would love to hear from a lot of our listeners.
I haven't heard a lot of negative about Amores Perros, but...
Well, that's true.
Yeah, I would love to hear what our listeners have to say, too. And I would encourage you to watch it again after hearing what Nate thinks about it. Because I want to. I probably won't. But I want to. And that's saying something. So you've got various outlets to reach us. You can comment on our website, canwestillbefriends.net. You can email us, feedback@canwestillbefriends.net.
Make sure you catch us on our social media. We got Facebook. We got Twitter.
Yep, we're part of the machine.
But please let us know any of your thoughts on Birdman, Inarritu, The Revenant. If you've seen The Revenant.
We've seen that. We're surprisingly up to date.
This is unlike us.
Yeah.
We've seen a movie that people are talking about right now.
Right now, yeah. And we chose to ignore that fact and talk about a movie from last year.
Maybe your Oscar predictions, listeners. Do you think The Revenant's going to take it? Do you think Inarritu is going to do it 2 years in a row?
I do, because he's impressive.
Mm-hmm. You do.
It's the kind of movie that people will watch once and be like, oh, it's impressive.
Yeah.
Give it to him. Give it to Leo. He gets the Oscar for all that grunting and face contorting he did, and he looked real cold a lot. You can also listen to us through various outlets. There's always iTunes, there's Stitcher. We're also now on player.fm.
Yeah,
which
we
is
were
an Android
featured.
app. Yeah, we've been trending on Player FM for a while now.
And they do some really cool stuff with their app. It's a great app for, like, if you are looking for podcasts and you want some interesting recommendations. I think it does a really good job with that. So check out Player FM.
Yeah, it's only on Android.
True. Yes.
But that's not a problem for me. I have an Android.
I'm out of luck.
So we try to keep you guys up to date with every place you can find us, and that's one of the newer ones.
Wherever you get us, we're just happy you're listening. And why don't we go ahead and maybe talk about what we're going to discuss in our next episode of Can We Still Be Friends?
So for our next movie, we're taking a couple connections here for this one. It's a movie neither of us have ever seen, for one thing.
Yeah. But I've wanted to.
Yeah. It's 25 years old this year.
So there's an anniversary.
So there's
going
that.
for it.
It's a special anniversary. We're also... One of the things that people are talking about with these Oscar nominations is the lack of diversity.
Yeah.
Not from a lack of diversity in certain movies. Of course, it is skewed one way. But there was Beasts of No Nation. There was Straight Outta Compton. There were opportunities for...
Spike Lee made 2 movies.
Spike Lee made 2 movies, right.
Will Smith gave supposedly, I haven't seen it, but a very good performance in Concussion. Yeah.
So for the second year in a row, not the only 2 years that the Oscars have skewed towards white nominees, but it's kind of been a bigger issue the last couple of years, is that there is a lack of specifically black actors or filmmakers nominated. So we're going to watch 1991's Boys in the Hood. directed by John Singleton, who at 24 was the youngest nominee for Best Director ever, but also the first black Best Director nominee. Which is kind of crazy because Spike Lee had made Do the Right Thing 2 years before, and Spike Lee's never been nominated for Best Director Oscar.
And Do the Right Thing is, oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh,
anyways, yeah.
One of the best films ever.
Absolutely, yeah, hands down.
So I wonder if in 1991 they thought, finally a black Best Director nominee. Now there's gonna, the doors are gonna be open. Well, it wasn't until Lee Daniels for Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire, was nominated for Best Director that it happened again.
Yeah.
It's only happened 3 times. It was John Singleton, 91, Lee Daniels, and then Steve McQueen, who did win for 12 Years a Slave. Anyway, it's kind of a tough issue. But when it comes down to it, we want to see Boys in the Hood because it's a movie that was very critically acclaimed at the time, but it's sort of been forgotten.
Yeah.
And we'll maybe explore that. Maybe it's too of its time, but I think that was a very important time.
Or maybe is it time for us to really take a look at it with all the stuff that's going on, especially with Black Lives Matter and a lot of the talk about diversity that's needed in all sorts of areas of our life in America.
Yeah, and how little changes over the years.
Yeah,
and
sadly.
Now we realize that we are 2 white men talking about this movie. So we aren't trying to be definitive or give the final word on this movie's merit or on black cinema or anything, but it's it's a topic we're very interested in, and it's a problem that we really feel concerned about. And Boys in the Hood is a movie that has lived on. John Singleton was a very promising director, and we kind of want to just see what happened with that movie, and how does it look 25 years later.
And we're going to go on a limb and guess that maybe a lot of our listeners also have not seen this movie, so it would be a really good time for you to also catch up with it with us and chime in on it and give us some of your response to it as well, or maybe your thoughts on diversity and how that fits into the world of cinema and film.
Yep.
So watch Boys in the Hood with us.
Yeah,
we're excited to do it.
And as always, if you could, leave us a rating on iTunes, although
always appreciate that.
In our concern for being accepted and loved, we probably won't read it in case there's something bad in there. But tell your friends, and as always, thank you so much for listening.
Thanks a lot.